The decline of health in America may have started long ago with the help of corporations. In the 1960s, the sugar industry heavily lobbied against the fat industry, paying scientists to blame fat rather than sugar for dietary-related health problems. Now, Big Sugar also buried the results of important research, linking sugar intake to health problems like heart disease for decades. Heart disease is now the #1 killer in America. Big Sugar's deceptive practices have only recently been exposed.
You eat real food,
yes.
You're going to be in a pretty good place.
It's not that hard. I often teach at churches, and I say it's really easy. Just ask yourself, did God make this or did man make this? Did God make a Twinkie? No. Did God make an avocado? Yes. It's pretty simple. So most of the stuff we eat are food-like substances. They're highly processed, highly refined, which drive diabetes, obesity, heart disease, chronic disease, and we really should be eating food.
Yeah, would you say if God made it, keep it? What did you say?
God made it, eat it.
Eat it.
If man made it, leave it.
It's what we do to our food here. You got GMOs now. You got all these preservatives. Everything in the store has to have a shelf life of 30 days. So they put chemicals on everything. We got chemicals in our water supply. We got chemicals used by farmers far too much that gets into the dirt, it gets into the water system, and it gets to where today you can't even drink water out of a stream because it will be polluted by chemicals, which 50 years ago you didn't have that problem. So the big problem to me is what we're doing in the creation of our food. We're worried more about quantity instead of quality.
People understand that certain foods in the food supply are addictive. So sugar mainly and processed foods are designed to be addictive. You know, I've met with top leaders in the food industry, and they explain to me how they have taste institutes where they hire craving experts to create the bliss point of food and heavy users. I mean, these are their internal terminology about creating addictive foods, and they harvest taste buds and put them in the lab, and then they test different things against them to create the most pleasurable experience. And we know biologically that it affects your brain like cocaine or heroin or alcohol, and that we can map that out.
Because of the lobbying industry's power, Americans today consume more sugar than they have in history. Do you think the government should force the food industry to be honest with consumers? How can such major lies be kept from the public and told to them for so many decades?
Money and lobbyists, simple. It's the system. I gripe about it all the time. The Democrats and Republicans have created a system of bribery. You go bribe them, you get what you want. The sugar industry bribes them, so therefore they don't educate us on it. They allow sugar because they're paying the bills to put it in everything we eat.
And here's the hard truth. Americans are fat and getting fatter. A shocking new report from the Centers for Disease Control shows America's obesity rates show no signs of slowing down. The CDC reports that 40% of American adults are obese. That's 2 out of 5 people.
Enough of this stuff. You know, one day I was at Sirius Radio, and I was sitting in the green room. There were about a dozen of us sitting in there. I was the only person in that room not looking at a cell phone or playing with one. You know, technology's wonderful, but you still gotta do things. You gotta walk, you gotta exercise. Take care of your body. It's the only house you have to live in on this planet, truly. It isn't the house over your head, it's the house you live in, your own body. Take care of it like you would your house at home.
We're living in a time where we have access to so much information, almost too much information. When I saw that thing about medicine, food being a medicine in your book, I thought it made me think about what medical students are learning about food.
Nothing.
What are they learning?
Nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, 25% of schools have the required amount of nutrition education in medical school. And of that, it's usually about like nutritional deficiency diseases like scurvy or malnutrition like kwashiorkor or marasmus, which is stuff we don't see.
Our doctors aren't being trained the way they should. And what else? Because we're sort of battling systemic.
Right. There's a number of reasons we're so confused. First, doctors don't learn anything about nutrition. 2, the food industry funds a lot of research. Right. So if the food industry funds a study, it's 8 to 50 times more likely to show a benefit for that product. The Dairy Council funds a study on milk, guess what? It's a health food. If the soda industry funds a study on soda and obesity, guess what? There's no link.
In 2015, the suicide rate among underage girls in the United States reached a 40-year high. Has life in this country really become so miserable? What do you think is causing this? Is it bullying, body image problems, social media? Why women?
Boy, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. That's a tough one to ask me, Brigida. But it's obviously something we need to look at, because whenever you see a spike in something like this, there always seems to be a root cause. Something is causing it to happen. All these kids with the emotional problems today. I remember I didn't see that when I was a kid.
But at a certain point, it dawned on me that given my background, I was able to sort of put on my journalist hat and really dive into the research to explore the mechanisms at play that were robbing my mom of her brain power. And the optimism that I was reading in the medical literature was a stark contrast to the sort of neurological nihilism that I experienced in doctors' offices with her. So I became sort of obsessed with culling information from all sources, and my background as a journalist gave me the ability to know what sources were worth looking into and exploring further and what were more pseudoscience and stuff that I should leave alone. And I decided to basically reach out to researchers around the globe, and at this point I've read hundreds, if not thousands, of medical research papers. I've interviewed some of the top research scientists in the world. I've built a rapport with some of the most well-known clinicians practicing dementia prevention, and at a certain point you learn enough about a topic and you become obsessed to learn so much about a topic that you glean a bit of expertise in it. So that's what led me to writing Genius Foods, which is a book that I think really separates fact from fiction and goes deep into the mechanisms behind dementia and Alzheimer's disease as we know them today. But it's also a book about optimizing the way that your brain works in the here and now, because something that very few people realize is that the same things that you can do that'll minimize your risk for some of these awful diseases that we're talking about actually also make your brain work better so that you can feel happier, have more energy. This is incredible, and it's something that very few people know about.
Life expectancy in America has declined for the second year in a row, with more Americans dying early. Now, if you look at the statistics, the numbers don't seem all that dramatic, with a decline of just 0.1 year. But if you look deeper, it turns out America has one of the largest income-based health disparities in the entire world. According to a recent report, the poorest third of Americans, almost 40%, say they are in poor health, when compared to 12% of the richest third.
It's embarrassing that the richest country in the world for the last 100 years would have people in the health conditions they're in today. We have money to fight wars all the time. I harp on this all the time. We have plenty of money to kill people. We have plenty of money we spend on billions on new aircraft carriers named after Gerald Ford. Meaningless crap that floats out in the ocean today. And yet we have people in our own country with bad nutrition, bad health care, and I think part of it comes down to, in the United States, the use of preservatives here, our food. When I go off the grid, I eat organic food that will spoil in a week. All the food in the United States has a shelf life of at least 30 days, all these chemicals they put on it. Well, to me, that's the answer. It's what we're doing with these GMOs and these chemicals has to be part of the reason why our health care is beginning to fade.
It's a well-known fact that America is one of the most obese nations in the world, as you said, and the problem is only getting worse. Now, according to the most recent reporting, 40% of American adults are obese. That's nearly half of all adults, Governor. And children aren't faring any better. Almost 20% of our nation's children suffer from excessive weight. That's too much. Today, more people die from overeating than starvation and human violence. It seems like we're fighting a war on ourselves, doesn't it, Governor?
Yes, it does, and it's a stupid war. And look at our lifestyle today. Everybody lives with the cell phone. Everybody lives with the computer, all the way down to our smallest children. I remember when I was a kid, you went out in the backyard and played. You went down to the park and played. You did physical things. That's the other thing we need to look at. Physical training. You can't sit on your ass all day long and think you're going to be physically fit.
Dietary treatment guidelines for people with something called mild cognitive impairment were just a couple months ago updated to include exercise. So your doctor might as well write exercise on the prescription pad.
Everything can't be solved with a drug, and a lot of plants and a lot of nutrition and things like that can do things naturally that something created in a laboratory can do. Why would you choose the laboratory when you got the natural the way it was meant to be?
Thousands of years ago with Hippocrates, who said, let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food. But now we think of food mostly as energies, calories, right? Calorie restriction is the way to lose weight. You want to eat less, exercise more, except there's really no evidence that that works because we've been getting fatter and fatter. Mm-hmm. And we're getting that advice from our doctors, our nutritionists, from the government, from food industry, which should make you suspicious. And the truth is that food is actually far more than calories. It's information. It's like instructions that talks to your body with every single bite. So it changes your gene expression. It regulates your hormones. It changes your immune system, can create inflammation or reduce inflammation, affects your microbiome, affects your brain chemistry, literally with every single bite. So it's like code that programs your biology. And if you're putting junk in, you're going to get junk out. That's why disease happens. So food, it turns out, is probably one of the most powerful drugs on the planet. We can reverse type 2 diabetes in a few weeks, changing people's diet, but there's no medication that can do that.
All right, Governor, we could throw money at the problem, as some politicians are quick to suggest, but it might not really solve the issue. We're spending more than any other nation in the world, but longevity of life stays the same. Healthcare accounts for 20% of America's GDP, and the average person pays about $9,000 per year. Yet life expectancy is on par with nations that spend half as much. How is that possible, Governor? Why is healthcare such a money pit?
Well, you know, Brigitte, sometimes I don't have the answers. And this is one that I really don't have the answer to. I can only assume and move forward and say it's what we do to our food here. By looking at the statistics, it's got to be, you got to look to the source. What's causing it, Brigitte? And I got to think it's this food and the chemicals and preservatives that Monsanto and these people force the farmers to put on everything to get the most crops. It isn't necessarily they're the best crops, they're just the most crops. And that's what they seem to be looking for.
Should we ban sugary foods, close McDonald's, or implement a sin tax just like Seattle has on sugary beverages?
Not necessarily. Again, it comes down to, I'm not a big guy that says government should step into everything. This is a personal responsibility issue. That's why I'm so vehemently talking to the people out there to take care of themselves. Don't look for the government to take care of you. Take care of yourself. And this is one issue you can do it on. Eat correctly, exercise, and get proper amount of sleep, and you'll find out, guess what? You'll probably live longer. Now, what are some of the foods we should all eat to improve brain function and productivity? What's out there that will focus in on making our brains healthier?
Well, one of, I think, the most practical tips that I give in the book and that I tell people in general is if you can eat one large salad every single day, you're checking off so many of your nutritional boxes. And it's a really great way to get in a myriad of micronutrients, which the brain needs to thrive, dietary fiber. It's a great vehicle for extra virgin olive oil, which research has really sort of spotlighted as being highly neuroprotective. And evidence does show, actually published this past month in the journal Neurology, that people that eat one salad per day on average have brains that look about 11 years younger. So, you know, by eating a large daily salad every single day, that's something that pretty much everybody can do, no matter where in the world you are. And just to give you some guidelines, you know, when I say a large daily salad, you want to fill it primarily with dark leafy greens. So I'm talking about kale, spinach, arugula. You want to leave the iceberg lettuce alone. Iceberg lettuce is just water and fiber, essentially. It doesn't contain many of the micronutrients that the brain needs, such as magnesium, folate. Whereas spinach, kale, these foods are highly correlated with improved brain function. So again, you know, one daily salad every single day, start there.